I love our kids at Anthem, and I'm grateful to all those of you who lead them and who shepherd them and teach them. We need more of you to step up and be involved in that, but we're so grateful to those of you who are involved in that process with our kids. If you have like maybe kids that are growing up, family of grown-up children like I do, you'll notice over the years that there'll be things that one of your kids does that would shock you if the other kids did it. You know, so like my oldest daughter, you know, if we're going on a trip, there's one word that would describe, you know, who she is before a trip, and that is structure, you know? And I noticed this when she was 7 years old, and I took her on a trip just with me and her. We went to England, and 3 days before the trip, her suitcase, her carry-on, and all her girl accessories were all right by the door and all planned and ready to go 3 days before the trip. She could have walked out that door right there and then and would have been totally fine because that's the way she rolls. But that would shock me if that was the posture that any one of the rest of the four of us in our family would take, because we're not like that. Another example, just last night at dinner, he didn't know I was going to say this, but Micah told us that the night before, I don't know if he was in bed or just, you know, relaxing for the evening, he read the entire Wikipedia entry about Mitt Romney. I'm like, you got to get yourself a life, man, but bigger than that, that's a 16,000 word essay, but bigger than that, I was like, it would shock me if either of my other kids or either of us did that recreationally, you know? It just wouldn't happen. And then perhaps more pertinent to what I want to talk about this morning, when Elise was 8, 9, or 10, we don't know, remember exactly the age, we were on a 10-minute car drive, dropping her off at a friend, and she was sitting in the back of the car, and it was quiet for a few minutes, and then she said, "Dad, who makes all the stuff?" And, I mean, we had 5 minutes, but for me to explain how everything that has been made so far and manufactured in this world came into being. But it would shock me if either of the other two ever asked that question, but that question didn't surprise me at all, coming from somebody who was always kind of lived in terms of possibility and her imagination of what could become, maybe what could be invented that hasn't been invented or designed yet. And you know, she's currently doing a degree in technical design, so I think she's like still asking that question and trying to figure it out as well. My explanation to that question didn't take long. Manufacturing isn't my expertise at all. But do you ever have those deep questions about how we got here, how everything that exists got here, and where everything that used to exist has now gone? Think about it. Like a lot of the things that exist now just didn't exist a short time ago, did they? Like when I was in my 20s, I remember being so excited when in the town center of our London commuter suburb where we lived, taking up the greatest retail real estate, a sign started going up on this one store with one word in big letters, Blockbuster, you know? And like, once we got into this, man, we thought it would be there forever, didn't we? And that nothing would ever change. And by the time we moved to the US in 98, a few years in, we had kids, and a big part of family movie night would have been walking or getting on our bikes to bike or walk about a third of a mile to the Blockbuster from our house, walking down the endless aisles of every movie choice you could imagine was right there in Blockbuster. Now you spend the same amount of time that we would have spent biking to and from the store, just like scrolling through Netflix, right? We've changed the way we do it. But we couldn't have imagined that Blockbuster would ever not exist. It's hard to imagine that some things that existed don't exist anymore. Just the other day, I was setting up with a new doctor, and I was on the phone and gave her my phone number, and she said, "Is that your home phone or is that your cell phone?" And I'm like, "Are we still doing this? Like, really? Like, I mean, you have my number. You know, this is the best way to call me." There was a time when mobile phones didn't exist, where the TVs, flat screen or otherwise, didn't exist, where the light bulb existed or freezers or engines. many of the things that we have around us at one point, they started to exist. But one LA futurist and pastor, Erwin McManus, talks about this. He says he's excited about things that exist in non-existence. Things that already are like an idea in somebody's mind, but there hasn't been enough love to bring them into existence yet. And he said he's fascinated by things that are waiting for somebody to take the possibility of something and turn it into existence. And I think, Anthem, our church is somewhat like that. Ideas need intentionality, don't they? They need dreaming. They need people to stay up late at night. They need planning, and they need commitment in order for something that doesn't exist to become a reality. And so a few years ago, at one point, Anthem didn't exist, but for a good bunch of us, we felt as a team that we believe that this thing should exist, that in this community here, there should be an expression of the local church as described in the book of Acts, that in some ways it's just the same as every other church, but in other ways it's different than every other church. Because it's a local expression of God's people that has a uniqueness. And some of you will think, well, yeah, it's actually only this church that encouraged me, or for some reason or some way that it functions or exists, to continue to pursue God or to start to pursue God, that 1,000 other churches didn't. And so, Anthem, we must know that God put us here. God wanted us to be here in this part of Greater Boston. And we've always said that the word anthem, and not specifically related to our church, but the word anthem does a few things. It turns individuals into a community. If you're at a sports game and the national anthem is sung, all of a sudden you don't feel like scattered individuals anymore. You feel together. An anthem turns individuals into a community. It calls us to a higher purpose, and it defines who we are. And for us, that's who Jesus has always been. He's been the one who turns us from scattered individuals into a community. He's the one who gives us new purpose, and he defines who we are. And I want to unpack some of these thoughts over the next few weeks. Today, I want to talk a little bit about our mission statement, but I'll do that in a few minutes. But over the next few weeks, I want to talk a little bit about what it is to be Anthem Church, what it means to be us. And as we start 2025, for those of you who might be newer to our community, I hope that this is an encouragement to you to dig in and think, yes, this is the church that I want to be a part of. This is the local expression of something that exists right now that God's put me as a part of and wants me to serve in and to worship in and to be a part of. You know, we always wanted to be a church where lost people could become found, where people who Jesus might have described as lost, and for some of you, you'd be like, yep, right here. You know, that's me. That was me. I'm on the journey to feeling found. You know, we want to be the kind of church where lost people can be found. Have you ever experienced the frustration of losing something? How many of you lose things regularly? Anybody? Anybody here? You know, there's probably a few things that we lose regularly. Maybe there's a few things that someone in your household loses regularly. Maybe your parents or your spouse or kids. You can point to them right now if you want. But so maybe on the count of three, just maybe in one word, just mention the thing that gets lost. Either you lose it or someone in your house loses it all the time. Okay, on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Right, you see? There's those things that we lose. It's phones and keys. It's books. It's wallets. So many things get lost. A little while ago, maybe a year or so ago, I had bought a bunch of AirTags to hopefully not lose some things, pets, people in some cases that could be tagged and kept under a shorter leash. And then a few months went by, and then batteries died, and now I've lost the batteries that I got to replace the things that are designed to help me not lose things, which would be great. Losing something is so frustrating, isn't it? If only for a short period of time. Lost people in the world is something that we see in the scriptures frustrated Jesus to the point where he wanted to make it so clear to us, and especially clear to anybody who would diss his mission, that lost people meant so much to him. Luke chapter 15 has been a standard for us of what this means, of what this should mean for us as followers of Jesus. And Jesus told 3 parables to describe how he felt about lost people in the world. Luke chapter 15, verse 1 says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners, and he eats with them.' Then Jesus told them this parable. 'Suppose one of you has 100 sheep, and he loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the other 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders, and he goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent." You know, this passage opens up with kind of a description of the major players who are in the story, who were present at the time. It starts out in verse 1 and it says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus." These are the people that perhaps we might call lost. These are the outsiders. These are the people that many of the community weren't sure if they were supposed to hang out with or not. But Jesus had a way about him of drawing these tax collectors and sinners into his orbit. And it continues in verse 2. It says, "But the Pharisees and teachers of the law muttered." Can I hear some muttering this morning? Right? Just checking you're all with me. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." They were just disgusted that this person who they thought should be so pious, this person who they thought should be so perfect and so pure as far as their Jewish customs was concerned, was actually taking time to hang out, to spend time, to eat, to experience the closest form of human relational contact with groups of people who would be considered much less than who he was. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and he eats with them." And this got Jesus in parable mode. He's like, all right, it's on. Let's get some stories out here that can explain in great detail and probably exaggerated detail the problem that I have with the attitude that these people have got. And he says, he makes this personal. He says, talks to his followers and says, like, suppose one of you had 100 sheep. I bet you're looking across that room, somebody did have 100 sheep. This was subsistence farming. This was agricultural kind of, everyone had some sheep. Probably, maybe you had 20 or 100 or 200 sheep. And so they're looking around thinking, yeah, this already feels like us. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and he loses one of them. And if you've got 99 left and you lose one, that's probably pretty good odds, right? You wouldn't think that was bad. No one intends to lose a sheep. No one intends to become lost. But sometimes life happens. Sometimes difficulties happen. We have 9 chickens, and there's been a time when one of them, these animals are worthless, but there's been times when one of them disappears, and we'll leave the 8, we'll go find the other one. There's been times when I'm like, no, stay away. But it hasn't happened yet. Open the door for all the others to run for freedom. But, we know a little bit about what it's like to look. Leaving the 99 and going after the one should be what the church's mission is all about. We've said this, that this is our mission statement at Anthem. We are here to awaken everyone around us to the life God has for us. For some of us, we've been living this out together for 6 or 7 years. But for some of you, that might be new terminology. We're here to awaken everyone around us to the life God has for us. There's a few pieces of that. This word awaken has always been a key point of that for us. Because I don't know what it's like in your house, but there's a lot of ways that you can wake someone up. You can awaken somebody to the point where they don't ever want to see you again, right? You know, if you go into barge into someone's room and you awaken them in such a way that is obnoxious and is rude and is unthoughtful, but you can also awaken somebody with love. You can awaken somebody with breakfast. You know, doesn't happen much in my house. I wish it happened more, but it can be done, right? And I could do it too. But we can awaken somebody with callousness, or we can awaken people with love. We might be in a city, we are in a region of our country where people have better reasons than in any part of the United States to lock the bedroom door and say, I do not want to be awakened by the church. You know, between various abuses that have taken place in the church, between things over the last few decades that have given people in our region reasons to say, no, I'm going to put a wall up, to the political divisions that make people think, oh, that represents the church, then I'm out. And we have every reason and every necessity to think about how we will awaken those around us to the gospel. We've said that we are here to awaken everyone around us to the life God has for us. And we always like to put this word one in parentheses because Jesus talked about leaving 99 who may have just fitted into some broad category and being specifically concerned about one. Being specifically concerned about somebody who doesn't just fit the mold or fit into the group or isn't a part of the community. Who is the one in your life? Maybe there's 5, 6, 7 ones with whom it is your calling to take intentional steps towards in order that someday the lost might be found. I believe that there's people who might represent the one in our lives that only you, because they are around you. Bruce, put that mission statement back up again, will you? So that because there are individuals who are around us, they are around you in your sphere. They're in your orbit and not around mine. But that you and I might have the ability to share Jesus with them in a way that the next person sitting next to you in this room can't. Who's the one in your life? Jesus ran towards lost people. And if we are to be people who are like him, then we are to posture our lives and we are to posture our church towards those who are lost. Lost people becoming found is a big deal to Jesus. He celebrates that, perhaps, and describes here in such great detail how celebration takes place when someone who is lost becomes someone who is found. Man, I can't tell you how exciting it was this morning for me to hear the stories of Jonathan and Anthony up on the stage. People who would say, yeah, I was lost, who are experiencing having been found by Jesus Christ. That thrills me no end to see that take place over and over in many of our lives here this morning. In verse 6, Jesus continues the story about the lost sheep. And he says, then he calls his friends and neighbors together. And he says, rejoice with me. I found my lost sheep. This guy, whoever lost the sheep, he gets on the phone. It could be his cell phone, could be his home phone. We don't know. But he gets on the phone. He calls those near him. He says, I found my lost sheep. And Jesus is like, I tell you the truth. There's more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who don't need to repent. God has a special bias and a special thought towards those who are lost. And in this story, he was so intent about getting this story over to those in the crowd who were or were not lost that he told this same story 3 times. He talks about a lost sheep. He talks about a lost coin. He talks about the lost son, what we may know as the story about the prodigal son. Watch what happens at the parable, the end of the lost coin, just a few verses down in verse 15. He describes this parable of a lost coin, and then he says, and when she finds it, the woman who's lost her coin, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, rejoice with me, I found my lost coin. In the same way, I tell you, there's more rejoicing in the presence of the angels over one sinner who repents. There's Jesus again, saying the same thing. You got to know this. There is so much joy when one sinner repents. Take a look at what happens at the end of the story of the lost son. Kind of similar idea. Something's lost, and now it's found. Luke 15:32, it says, but we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead, and he's alive again. He's lost, and now he's found. And Jesus was talking over and over again about things that were lost and being found, and a coin that was lost, and a coin that was found, a son who was lost. Imagine the devastation there. And then the son is, after so much time, is found. He says, there's got to be celebration every time. Side note, that's why we celebrate baptisms at Anthem, because a baptism is a visual demonstration of somebody saying, I was lost, but now I'm found, right? And we're going to do baptisms here on February 16th. If you are interested in joining those being baptized, sign up at anthemchurch.life/baptism. And you can share a little bit there about your story and what you feel like God's done in your life. It's not an essay, don't worry. There's no pass-fail, but we just love to get to know you, and we'd love to have you be a part of that baptism. So we will always celebrate baptisms. We will always celebrate that visual, family-focused, us-together demonstration and testimony of somebody saying, I was lost, but now I'm found because of Jesus Christ. And if Jesus ran towards sinners, and it was important to him to celebrate when a lost person is found, when lost people are found and come into a relationship with him, then that should be what we are about. We should be about finding lost people in our lives and celebrating their foundness. But if you're like me, you need to be re-energized at times, regularly, in terms of your posture, the posture of your life towards lost people around you. It's easy for us to think about the 99. We can get all wrapped up in everything to do with the 99 and still forget the one. It's the reasons why churches are splitting. It's the reason why churches die out. It's the reason why perhaps there's so many denominations that we end up so concerned about what's inside, what we're about, what we look like, the 99 that's inside, that we're forgetting that Jesus' posture is towards the one. And I want to ask you that I want to challenge you that the individuals that God has put around you are people that nobody else could share Jesus with if you don't do it, if you and I don't do it. Would you reposture your lives towards the lost? And I believe that you and I should do it individually, and we should do it as a community. If it comes to mind, lost people matter to God, they should matter to the church, and they should matter to you and I as well. That mission statement, again, we are here to awaken everyone around us to the life God has for us. You know who the best people to share Jesus with the world? You all. Because this community, you are some of the most gracious, reasonable, loving, hospitable people that I've ever met. That you can pat yourself on the back right now if you'd like, or the person next to you, because I believe that we have something very unique here. We have some very gracious, very loving, hospitable people in this community who think outside of themselves, who are not just here for themselves, who are thinking about this community for the good of our broader community. You know, back in 2019, a large Christian research organization called the Barna Group did an extensive study, studying people who aren't yet Christians and asking them questions. If you were going to be asked, if you were going to be talked to about faith, about Christ, how would you want it done? And we think, we know, we'll just go to the scripture. Well, it helps sometimes to go to people who we're going to talk to and ask, how would you like me to talk to you about faith, right? And what was discovered, the most popular answers in this study was, I'd want somebody who listens without judgment. That sounds like many of you. Many people said, I'd like to be approached by somebody who is not intent on forcing a conclusion. Have you ever met people who talk about faith in such a way that they are trying to force a conclusion? Have you watched it happen? Have you cringed? You know, some said, I would want to be talked to about the gospel by people who will allow others to form their own conclusions. That occasionally we might need to take a step back. And to talk to people who will be confident and in sharing their perspective, as well as taking that step back. Would we be confident in sharing our perspective? And you know, I feel like I know this for a fact that some of you are in church this morning, and you're in this specific church. This specific church, that kind of the idea that existed, and then it existed, and now we're all a part of it. This specific church, because you came in and you thought, well, those Christians didn't deal with me in such a way that those others had in the past. Or for some reason, I trust these people more than I trusted some other Christians that I've encountered in the past. Anthem, let's guard that trust. Let's respect that. Let's respect the fact that there are some people that call this community their home, that had a struggle darkening the door of other churches. But they said, well, it seems like I can find God here. And some of you have experienced that here. Most of you are the kind of person that I'd want to hear Jesus from if I was in the lost category. And you've shown your commitment to this version of the local church. And even though there could be 1,000 other churches, God had it in his plan for this one to exist and for all of us to continue its mission. This morning, I want to show a 10-minute video to you to introduce somebody who came from a Muslim background and ended up following Jesus. And his name's Abdu, and Abdu has been a friend of mine for a couple of decades, and we have the privilege of hosting Abdu here for a Skeptics Night on January 22nd. And I'll come back in a few minutes and wrap up, but I'd love for you to hear a little bit of Abdu's story, get to know him now before we meet him in a week or two.
I would start my story basically really at almost the beginning, which is I was raised as a Shiite, and I was pretty serious about it at an early age. I mean, I was a red-blooded American kid. I was born in Detroit. So I thought Islam was true. And by definition, then, everything that contradicted it in whatever ways has to be false. So I'd ask a question: why? Why are you a Christian? And what I discovered was, in the beginning, some really sort of shocking responses. The answer was, because my parents go to a Presbyterian church on Christmas and Easter, but you haven't thought through it at all. Tradition is your reason? Really, tradition is your reason? And I would lay into them, things like, the Bible's been changed, you can't trust it, the Trinity makes no sense. My goal was to eventually say, okay, look, you might doubt this, but Islam is actually great because it fills in those gaps. When I was an undergraduate at the University of Michigan, these two guys who were going door to door talking with people about Jesus, but they came to our door in our apartment, and I made these guys pretty uncomfortable for hours at a time because I would ask them really hard questions. So we eventually developed this mutual interest in each other, and they would come repeatedly over and over again to the apartment. They would offer answers. Sometimes they give you the best answer you can give a person. I don't know. I'll get back to you. And that gave them lots of credibility in my mind. And then they had the integrity to research and get back to me. And they did that over and over again. And I wanted to knock the faith out of these two guys, not because I wanted to have them walk away destitute and of no faith, but I wanted them to actually see Islam as true. So I'm walking down the street in Ann Arbor, and there's these Gideons who are handing out Bibles. And I get a Bible from a Gideon. And I'm like, I'm going to read this thing, and I'm going to try to find a fundamental contradiction. Because, if the Bible's been changed, then there should be rampant contradictions. And I come across in Luke John the Baptist is baptizing people, and people are coming to him. And he says something fascinating. He says, "Who told you to flee from the wrath to come?" Meaning, of course, God's judgment for your sin. Who told you to flee from this? But the thing that really captured me was, he said, "Do not even begin to think to yourself you have Abraham as your father." What he's really saying there is that if you're relying on your ethnic heritage or even your religious heritage to get you the truth or to get you into heaven, you're looking up at the wrong thing. He says, God can raise up children of Abraham from the stones. In other words, God can make one just like you out of a rock. Your DNA is not what saves you. Your tradition is not what saves you. Truth is what saves you. That bothered me a lot. I'm sitting there reading this. And the reason why it bothered me was because I had been asking for years, Christians, why are you a Christian? And they would say tradition, and I'd say not good enough. And now I'm reading this book, the Bible, it's the same thing. John the Baptist is saying tradition is not good enough. He's agreeing with me. In all those years that I had sort of put Christians on the back foot, none of them got the chance to ask me, why are you a Muslim? And I had given them my reasons, by the way. I gave them all my evidences and my arguments, but they didn't ask me personally, why is it so important to you? And the answer was tradition. I was supposed to be that. So that day I decided I am going to follow whatever is true, tradition or not. John the Baptist's words got me thinking, or got me realizing that I have this confirmation bias and I ought to see things as objectively as I can. But now you're faced with the problem, because the Quran and the Bible don't say the same things about a lot of things. They say a lot of the same things in some areas, but in the key important areas they don't. Because the central heart of the biblical message is that human beings have sinned, and we all sin, and we have a fundamental sin nature, and that sin nature prevents us from doing things that would please a God who is the standard of justice and perfection. And so we need someone who's not us to save us from us. But Islam says that we do need God's forgiveness. I mean, it calls him oft-forgiving, most merciful. It's one of the most common things about God in the Quran. But that mercy is in fact earned. You have to do good works. Your good deeds need to outweigh your bad deeds, and if they do, then you'll go to heaven. I spent a lot of time trying to harmonize these two books. And as I was looking into it, more and more, I'm looking into the history of this. I began to look and to see, okay, is the Bible actually telling me true things about Jesus? What he said, and then what he did. And as over the course of the years, as I was studying this stuff, I began to see something that not only is the Bible preserved in telling me what happened in history, but it's corroborated by actual history. And I began to see there's some important things that the gospel message tells us about God's greatness. You see, if God is the greatest possible being, and every Christian and every Muslim believes this, that God is the greatest possible being, then certain things logically follow. If God is the greatest possible being, then he would express the greatest possible moral ethic, and that would be love. Well, what is the greatest possible way we can conceive of to express love? You know someone truly loves you when they're willing to do something that helps you, even if it hurts them. In other words, self-sacrifice is the greatest expression of love. I remember during this whole search that all the intellectual stuff finally coalesced, finally became a thing in my heart, because I saw the words in the pages of the Bible. Romans chapter 5, verse 8. For God demonstrates his love, not our love, but his greatest possible love, his self-sacrificial love, in that while we were sinners, those who hate God, Christ died for us. That to me is the greatest possible being expressing the greatest possible ethic in the greatest possible way. Yes, we sacrifice for those who love us back, but we don't sacrifice for those who hate us. And God looked at us as sinners, people who chose our way more than his, and said, I'm going to fix that. And I love you too much to let you live like this. And so he sacrifices. He gives of his only begotten Son, that whosoever shall believe in him will not perish, but have everlasting life. In that moment, I remember feeling this tremendous sense. I felt this finality, that all this time I've been looking for something. there was an elation over the fact that I don't have to prove myself to God anymore. I don't have to be tortured by the fact that I fall short all the time. I am now free to worship him, not out of a sense of attaining heaven, not out of a sense of being worried about hell, but out of a sense of gratitude. And that was so freeing, such a freedom from that. I remember sitting with a friend, and I was still wrestling with this stuff. And I had said to him, all these things are true in Christianity that I was hoping was true somewhere else. And then he asked me, he said, what's holding you back then? If all of this is true and it's speaking to your heart, what's holding you back? There's joy here. There's awe here. And I sat with him and a few others, praying to the Father in the name of the Son, through the power of the Spirit, to receive my salvation. I would urge you to investigate the truth. But if I say anything that matters in this time, it's that the journey is tough, the consequences are real, but the reward is great, and it's so worth it. It's so worth it. Ask yourself why you believe what you believe. I had asked plenty of Christians that, and if you're a Muslim and you know any Christians, you probably ask them the same question, like, why do you believe what you believe? I think it's important for us to always ask ourselves why. What's the fundamental reason we believe something? I found the truth that if God is truly the greatest possible being, then the cross is the greatest possible expression of God's love for you and for me. And it's not just a matter of hope, it's a matter of history, it's a matter of fact. And that's what the truth is. My name's Abdu Murray, and I found the truth.
There's anyone who is able to more thoughtfully, logically, and lovingly describe the gospel than Abdu. And in terms of his own presentation and then answering questions in the room that people may have, there's definitely a reason why he's traveling across the country and around the world sharing this. And he's at MIT the day before, and so we were able to have him come to be with us that night. Bring some friends with you that evening, that Wednesday night. I promise you it'd be a great evening. Just a final thought before we sing together. The night before Anthem launched, we went out for dinner. We had been dreaming, and a number of us have been thinking and planning, as I was talking about, with this idea for a year or so. And we'd kind of finally come to the place where where the church was going to launch and gather on a Sunday. A few of you were with us that morning. But we needed to go for dinner, Luke 15 rattling around in our heads for months now. And where else to go for dinner that night than the 99 restaurant, of course. I'd never been there before. We'd never been there before. I actually don't think I've been there since. But we went to the 99 just up on Middlesex Turnpike, and our kids and a couple of guests from out of town. And then the following morning, we had our first service together as a church community. And there was 99 of us. And it was a reminder to us that as much as we gather, the work that we do is not just about us gathering. It's about the work that God does through the 99 to the one that he's called us to reach. Stand and pray together. Lord Jesus, we recognize that regularly our posture needs to be shifted. We recognize that because of our tendency to move inwards, both individually, organizationally, for what that represents in our families, Lord, that together we might need to take stock now and then and think, where is my posture? Which direction am I looking? And Lord, I pray that today, that these words, especially the words from the scriptures, might have encouraged us and inspired us to be a community and to be individuals that move towards those who are lost, to walk in the direction of those who need you. And God, let that be truth for all of us, I pray. In Jesus' name.